Hi kids! Today we will learn more about the types of clauses. So let's start. We have already learned about two types of clauses, main clauses and subordinate clauses. Main clauses have both subject and predicate, and they can stand separately as sentences and express a complete thought or idea. Now let's learn about subordinate clauses. Subordinate clauses also have both subject and predicate, but they cannot stand separately as sentences, and they do not express a complete idea or thought. Let's see some examples. Ed kicked the ball. This is a main clause as it has a subject, Ed, and a predicate, kicked the ball. It can stand alone as a complete sentence and make sense on its own as it expresses a complete idea. Let's see another clause. When Ed kicked the ball. This clause also has a subject, Ed, and a predicate, kicked the ball. But it cannot stand alone as a complete sentence and cannot make sense on its own as it doesn't express a complete idea. So, main clauses are also called independent clauses as they don't have to depend on any other clause for their meaning. And subordinate clauses are called dependent clauses as they cannot have a complete meaning unless they are dependent on some other main clause or independent clause. Now, let's learn about independent clauses with examples. Now let's learn how independent clauses are connected to other clauses. First way is with the help of a period. Period will separate them into two different sentences, but they will be connected to each other by their common theme. For example, Eric goes to practice piano every day. He has a concert next month. The first clause in the sentence is, Eric goes to practice piano every day, which is an independent clause. The second clause is, he has a concert next month, which is also an independent clause, and they are separated with the help of a period. Yet, they are connected to each other by their common themes. Next is, we can separate two clauses with the help of comma and a conjunction. For example, Eric goes to practice piano every day as he has his concert next month. Here, the first independent clause is, Eric goes to practice piano every day, which is an independent clause, and it is connected to the second independent clause, which is, he has his concert next month, with the help of two things, a comma and a conjunction. Remember, comma comes first, and then it is followed by a conjunction. The two independent clauses can also be connected with the help of a semicolon, if they are not already joined with the coordinating conjunction. Consider this example. Some students utilized their free time. Others wasted their time. Here, the first independent clause, some students utilized their free time, is connected to the second independent clause, others wasted their time, by using a semicolon only. Here we have another way. Independent clauses are also connected with the help semicolon followed by a phrasal conjunction, like however, moreover, nevertheless, as a result, etc. And this we use when we are adding the second independent clause as extra information. For instance, James read a novel. Moreover, he really enjoyed the novel. Here, the first independent clause, James read a novel, is connected to the second independent clause, he really enjoyed the novel, by a semicolon, followed by a phrasal conjunction, moreover. Here, the second independent clause is adding extra information to the first independent clause. So we learned that independent clauses can be connected to each other in 4 different ways. First is using a period. Second is using a comma and a conjunction. Then is a semicolon. And the fourth way is a semicolon and a long conjunction or a phrasal conjunction. Now let's learn about dependent clauses. The clauses that depend on the main clauses or independent clauses for their meaning are called subordinate clauses or dependent clauses. They are called dependent clauses because they depend on the independent clause for their meaning. As shown in the example, he worked very hard and stood first in his class. Independent clauses, he worked very hard and stood first in the class is the dependent clause. And the easiest way to identify the dependent clause is they always begin with the subordinating conjunctions like and, but, moreover, further, that, though, etc. Here we have another example. They went early in order to get their favorite seats. Here, the clause, in order to get their favorite seats, starts with a subordinating conjunction, in order to. So, the clause in order to get their favorite seats is a dependent clause or subordinate clause. And the other clause, they went early, is an independent clause. Here we have more examples. Although he worked hard, he could not succeed. Here, the clause, although he worked hard, is starting with a subordinating conjunction, although. So, it is a dependent clause. And the other clause, he could not succeed, is an independent clause. We learned a dependent clause always depends on the independent clause for its meaning, and it can never exist without an independent clause. And also, a dependent clause always starts with a subordinating conjunction. Now let's learn about the punctuation rules when we connect a dependent clause with an independent clause. The first rule is that when the independent clause comes at the first place and the dependent clause comes at the second place, then there is no punctuation mark required between them. For example, I started learning swimming at early age because I wanted to be a professional swimmer. Here, the first clause is an independent clause and the second clause is a dependent clause as it starts with a subordinating conjunction, because. So, the rule says that when the independent clause comes at the first place and the dependent clause comes at the second place, then no punctuation mark, such as commas or semicolon, is required between them. Another example, I'll be delighted if you can work on Sundays. Here, the independent clause is I'll be delighted, and the dependent clause is if you can work on Sundays, which is starting with the subordinating conjunction if. I prefer to ride my bicycle to school because I can't wait for the bus. Here, the independent clause is I prefer to ride my bicycle to school, And we have a dependent clause because I can't wait for the bus. So you can see we are not using any comma to separate dependent clause from independent clause because independent clause comes first. Finish your food before it gets too cold. Here, the independent clause is finish your food, and dependent clause is before it gets too cold, which is starting with the subordinating conjunction before. And as the independent clause comes first, no comma to separate the two clauses. I can't give you a perfect outfit unless you have the right size. Here again, the independent clause, I can't give you a perfect outfit, comes first, and the dependent clause, unless you have the right size, comes after it. So, no comma is used to separate the two clauses. Now, let's learn about the second rule. When the dependent clause comes at the first place and the independent clause comes at the second place, a comma is used to separate two clauses. For example, if the dress is on sale, buy it for me. Here, the first clause is a dependent clause, and it is starting with the subordinating conjunction, if, and the second clause is an independent clause. So, we have used a comma between them. Let's see some similar example sentences. After months of research, he finally finished his project. After months of research is a dependent clause, as it starts with the subordinating conjunction after. He finally finished his project is an independent clause, and here the independent clause comes after the dependent clause. So, comma is used to separate two clauses. Whenever I go for eating out, I order pizza. Here, whenever I go for eating out is a dependent clause, as it starts with the subordinating conjunction whenever. I order pizza is an independent clause which comes after the dependent clause. So, comma is used to separate the two clauses. Here we have some more examples where you can see comma between two clauses, and the reason is independent clause comes after the dependent clause. While I was asleep, the dog knocked over the pot. So we have learned a lot about different types of clauses and how to connect them to each other. Now you may go ahead and take a quiz to learn more. Bye-bye! Tutway has thousands of animated videos on math, English, and science to clear the core basics of these subjects.